I have chucked a bunch of videos on this YouTube channel so far, but I also recognize that so far these videos are just random snapshots, things, thoughts that I've put out there. I think it's pretty unclear who I am, why am I making these videos, and what's in it for you who is watching. And so today I'd like to very clumsily give you a bit of insight into that. It's also convenient timing because it's approximately 6 months ago to today that I bottomed out at one of the shittiest times in my life so far. And having a chance to reflect on these last 6 months since then does in many ways provide the very answer to why these videos exist. And so if you have a bit of time, let me lift the veil a little bit, tell you a bit of a story, and please bear with me through the excruciating awkwardness and uncomfortability of talking openly about yourself to a camera sitting in a room by yourself to be watched by other people sitting presumably in other rooms by themselves at a later time. YouTube is some weird shit. Today is October 1st, 2022, but our story begins back in approximately March-ish 2022. And I was here, not exactly here, but in the city of London, the United Kingdom, you know, the one with the high T, low pound. And just like every good story, it begins with, "It was a dark and stormy night." And the reason I say that, not only because that is a badass way to introduce every story, but also because the clearest thing I remember of that time is that a crazy series of storms were ripping through the UK. Oh, how I remember like it was yesterday. There were rubbish bins flying everywhere, and people's favorite TV show was a YouTube live stream of planes trying to land at Heathrow.
Easy. Go on, son. Oh, okay, tippy toe.
And it was also pretty stormy in my head. Cringy segue, you are most welcome. But yeah, I had got into a little bit of a rough patch in my life. I don't want this to be a sob story, but in order to tell this, I kind of need to get a little bit in the feels. So, you know, like bring it in, take a knee champ, and actually no, let's rewind back further then to January 2019. In 2019, I moved from my home country, Australia, over to the UK. Looking for a change, like most lost Aussies in their 20s, I moved over here and life that year was chaotic. It was busy, but overall, it was a lot of fun. Moving to a new part of the world is never easy, but I hit the ground running that year. I had lots to keep me occupied, and it was a great introduction to London, truly one of the world's great cities. As 2020 began, I resolved that I'd try to breathe a little bit more this year, try to bring a bit more balance and well-being back into my life. Not be so caught up with trying to get up to speed, you know, the demands of a new city, a new job, all of that. It would be a year to cultivate a bit more all-roundedness, peace, happiness, well-being.
Got him!
Clearly that didn't happen. London plunged into lockdown in March 2020 and for the next couple of years was pretty badly affected on and off by the pandemic. And that's where things started to unravel a little bit, which in one sense is weird to say because relatively speaking, I was very fortunate during COVID to be able to keep my job, to be able to pay my rent, pay my bills, not get really sick with the disease, not lose any loved ones from the disease. Very fortunate. But it was the stuff that was unraveling under the surface. The thrill of a move to the other side of the world was now the isolation of being on the other side of the world. It was hard to not feel cut off from family, friends, all of that. The challenge of a new job replaced with nothing but that job. Wake up, work, sleep, isolated from co-workers, nowhere to go during the day, hanging out with a spreadsheet all day.
What's up?
And 6 p.m. Fridays bringing nothing but a big old sense of, now what? We all went through that stuff, but what I found was the real problem for me was the mental rewiring to accept stagnation, to accept not going anywhere, not doing anything, not just literally but figuratively, progressing to nowhere, just punching through the days, not trying new things, not experiencing anything new. Thought and behavior patterns are self-reinforcing, and that was the longer-term issue for me. Lockdowns didn't last, of course, but those patterns did. I almost unwittingly had conditioned myself to be going nowhere. And just like when you come across and see a stagnant pond or puddle of water, like covered in algae and gunk and dirt, you can't help but be kind of disgusted by it. And in the same way, I couldn't help but start to dislike myself. And when you start to dislike yourself, you just further retreat from the world because you don't think you're interesting enough to engage in and be accepted by that world. In not properly living, I started to somehow think that my best days were now behind me. And the only thing really to do about it is to just accept it, or worse yet, distract from it, turning to things like booze to distract from the bigger difficult but fundamental questions to always be able to answer. What the fuck am I doing? Where the fuck am I going? And why the fuck am I going there anyway? The reality was at this point I was drowning in anxiety, panic attacks, obsessive compulsive thoughts and habits, and genuine fear of interacting with other people that I didn't know really well. My physical health was getting worse, like I was out of shape and unfit, versus being someone who's pretty good usually with diet and exercise. And most of all, I was just deeply lonely and felt undeserving of anything better. And to top it off, I didn't feel like I could communicate this to really anyone at that stage because people have their own shit to deal with. No one was exactly doing great at that time. And sometimes you just kind of know that you're your own worst enemy. And so it feels unreasonable to expect that reaching out to other people will help solve your problems for you. Like I said, thought and behavior patterns can be self-reinforcing. In January 2021, borders reopened in Australia, and I was stoked. I thought that visiting home would be the solution to all of my problems. I just needed to freshen up, get a quick change of scenery, then I'll come back to London, and all will be sweet. But just like the other distractions in the past, that's all this was as well. I went home, and I had a brief good time reconnecting with family, friends, all of that. And I turned 30 as well. But when I came back to London in February of that year, it was at that point that things really started to fall apart pretty quickly. There was no papering over this hole that I had gotten myself into. There was no easy explanation or solution for why I was feeling this way. And it felt like there was nowhere left to run at this point, but just completely let this wave of emptiness completely crash over me. At that time, I had also just resigned from my job. The lease for my flat was about to end and wasn't being renewed, and I didn't really know what was going to happen next. I just remember going on these long, mopey-ass walks around London, feeling like a total piece of shit, unable to really function properly, unable to think clearly, and the only way I can really describe things at that point was a total mental breakdown. And I was scared for where things could potentially descend to from there. And it was at that point that I knew that I had to, so to speak, blow everything up and start again. I left my place, I packed what was important to me, I put it in storage, and I flew back to Australia. I spent the next few months home, incredibly gratefully to be with my family, and spent some disconnected time in peace and quiet, really, just kind of re-establishing from square one who I am, what are my values, what do I care about, what do I not care about, what do I fear, what am I excited by, how did I get to this point? And that was by no means a comfortable process. It sucks laying bare your mistakes, your shortcomings. It's very humbling to hit a life milestone like 30 with so much not being where you want it to be. But it was also the most important and helpful thing I could have possibly done in that moment. Confront and accept the problem. Plot a course for how things could get better in the short term. Dream of a scenario for how things might look like in the long term. A few months ago, I came back to London and have been more or less rebuilding ever since. And one of the things I realized that I had long neglected was exploring interests, hobbies, potential passions, things I had cast aside because I was anxious about being judged, anxious about failing, anxious about everything. And video making is just one of those small things. I like it. I'm a total newbie at it. I don't really know what on earth I'm doing with it, but I love being able to craft a message and share something, to be able to write, to be able to structure, to be able to use video as a medium, all the things that are shown and not shown. And the thought most of all that someone might watch something unique you produce and get something out of it. A laugh, a thought, a reflection, something that's real, no matter how shallow or deep that realness is. And so, what is the point of these videos then? Well, I guess in one way, this is the kind of real-time guide of me going through this self-development journey, of trying to bring more balance and well-being into my life. But more importantly, I feel like there is a bigger mission, because I know that all the stuff that I've just rambled about is stuff that a lot of other people go through in maybe a smaller way, maybe a similar way, or maybe in a much worse version of. Like, yeah, the last couple of years haven't helped anyone, but I think there's a much deeper set trend of people out there who feel lost, who feel withdrawn, who feel stagnant, and may have the best intentions about fixing that, but aren't really sure how to begin, or maybe they just need a good pep up every now and then to be reminded of all the good, amazing stuff that is out there to provide meaning. And maybe that mission is even clearer now that the excuse of a pandemic is more or less behind us. Doesn't it feel scarier to know that your problems are still here? To me, bringing and celebrating more balance and well-being could mean a stupid, light-hearted video that's just there for a laugh. It could mean a travel video that's there to remind us of the amazing world that's out there. It could mean a more theoretical, practical, educational video to help us get a little bit better. It's all under the same big umbrella for me, and I hope that it's not too messy, and I'm sure things will refine as I go. But for now, I feel like the most important thing is to just make stuff that feels entertaining, interesting, helpful in some kind of way. Just the act of moving, of creating something, is immediately better than that earlier feeling of emptiness. I remember 6 months ago, as I was this sad sack aimlessly walking through the streets of London, that the worst thing at the time wasn't the current sensation of emptiness and pain. The worst thing was having lost complete confidence that things could ever get better. And 6 months down the track from then, I've more realized that you kind of have to fumble around in the beginning stages of getting comfortable with your problems, establishing and trusting in a process to slowly address them. Like, I don't have an overly sanitized before and after photo of 6 months of self-help for you. But the one thing that has fundamentally changed since then, and maybe it's taken all of 6 months to figure that out, is that base premise of hope is now there. To feel instinctively just enough strongly that things can get better, that there is something transformatively good on the horizon to run towards, and that we ultimately can control that for ourselves if we choose to. It's the message that I wish I could backhand slap across my face 6 months ago, but given that's impossible, I will backhand slap it across your face with positivity. I hope I can look back on these videos someday and be proud of and see it as proof of the fact that it can be done. And I hope that it's a helpful resource for you if you can relate to any of what I've just rambled about. All right, that's quite enough of that. Thank you for your time. I promise future videos won't be this weird and intense. That would be thoroughly unentertaining. Unentertaining. It's okay. Yeah, I hope you guys are doing well out there. And yeah, chat to you soon. Bye.